Thank you, Bridget. All right, welcome everybody to today's Helm developer call of December 10th, 2020. As usual, we're going to start with announcements and follow with discussion. All right, so we have a couple of announcements, actually quite a few. First one, Helm 3.4.2 was released yesterday. Thank you, Matt Farina, for that. After that, we have the 3.5 release. So the Rc1 milestone is to be cut January 4th for the release to happen January 13th. I think what's interesting about that is that it's going to be right after the vacation, the Rc1, and we won't have a Helm dev call very close to that. So I think we'll have to pay close attention to that happening properly. If we go down the list, weekly developer calls. I think, Bridget, you put that up. So we're going to have to decide what to do over the holidays. So
yep, and I think we did decide that. And the last weekly developer call of 2020 will be next week. And then there'll be no call on December 24th or December 31st, because those would be weird days to have calls. And our calls will resume on January 7th. So you have today and you have next week, and then we're back in January. And then I think Paul C. added those last couple of ones.
Oh yeah, I did. And I thought I wasn't going to be here, but I am. So I can talk about them, but they're pretty easy. If you haven't signed up for the Contributor Summit, you should totally do that. It is going to be a lot of fun. And you can tell people you're working, but really just play games all day. And then just a reminder that the CFP for KubeCon EU is closing on Sunday. So if you have talks to submit, you'd better get on that. I'm looking at you, Butcher, given the face you just made.
I'm going to make a face of, I volunteer to review your proposal. If you would like to give a Helm-related talk, reach out to me on the various internets.
And this one is separate from our dedicated Helm talk. We do have one dedicated Helm talk that anybody who's a core maintainer can volunteer to do.
all right. Anything else in the announcements? Nothing. All right. So let's jump into discussions. It's only a few points today. Tim, something about Helm 4 modularity and pluggable templating.
So I saw the talk that I think Matt and Bridget gave at KubeCon. And for those that don't know, I've been in Kubernetes a really long time, since like day zero. And we've, in the past former lives of mine, we've bumped into templating issues over and over and over and over and over again. And there's highly opinionated things that kind of happen. And I don't want to like say one language or one thing over the other, but I think what's common is, or what things we've learned in Kubernetes is that when in doubt, stub it out and create a pluggable interface around a certain construct or an abstraction layer. And then that provides facilities for people to be able to plug in their favorite implementation that they care about the most. From a VMware perspective, now that my latest hat is VMware, used to be a Red Hat, and used to be a Heptio hat, which never had. I have a VMware hat. The latest flavor of the month has been YTT as part of the Carvel tooling. But what I find is that this theme keeps on repeating itself. And what I would love to be able to do, and we could potentially resource or talk about, is the idea of maybe providing an abstraction layer around charts itself, such that you could have modularity for the format of the charts with an obvious defaulting to the existing templating mechanism that is there. I don't know if folks have, I'm sure folks have talked about this or thought about it, so I'm interested in seeing what.
So I'll first jump in and add a little context here. If you go to Helm 2, you'll actually see in the chart YAML file, you can set your template language. I forget what the property is. It defaulted to go TPL, but we had a thing there, and there was actually a mechanism baked inside of Helm v2 to have other engines, right, besides GoTPL to do your rendering and generating. And we put out a call and said, folks want this, please do. In fact, I remember the variable name here, right? It's a homage. The variable name for things other than GoTPL that you could extend internally was actually called Engine Yard, right? It was a playback to Who Owned Deus. And it was there in Helm v2. And people said, we want to do these other things. We've got opinions. And yet nobody ever extended it during the entire life of Helm v2. So the mechanism was pulled out in Helm v3. It's not there anymore. But we actually had this. We had that modality. We said, let's do it. And we offered it up for people to extend it. And it, it's like, if you build it, they will come. Nobody ever came. There were no other options built. And so it was pulled out in Helm v3. So that's kind of the context, as Adam points out, not one. And so that's the kind of the context of why we're here without having that extension mechanism. It was just something that wasn't used.
It's also too about timing. Like in the early days of Helm v2 was very early, and the deployment models and mechanisms that people used in the early days, they've become far more sophisticated. Like before I had bash scripts basically auto-generating YAML for a lot of my stuff, and the code was even checked into Kubernetes proper, right? And the way people are doing things today is far more sophisticated. We have clients and customers that basically have multiple layers of abstractions for their auto YAML generation via whatever template engine tooling they decide. So I think a lot of this too, the reason for the request now is because of the conversation piece brought up, but also we're seeing the demand. We see it in the wild, and it's far more sophisticated. And should that extraction layer exist, I think that it is probably about timing, right?
Probably the right step is to write a Helm improvement proposal for it, because if you're claiming there are different requirements and different things happening now, we should probably rehash them out formally. And because some of the things that caused problems in the past were interoperability between template languages and things like that. But I mean, it's the right time because we just now have cleared Helm 2 off the docket, so we can start talking about Helm 4 officially.
The other thing to point out here as well with this whole conversation is that if I'm understanding the requirements of the engine itself, when we were first talking about implementing and architecting it, it was just a field inside of the chart.yaml that shows the actual engine itself. So that was part of the chart package format. There is an opportunity here where it could be just, if you look at the API version right now, when we moved from Helm 2 to Helm 3, we had an API version of V1. And that had the engine field inside of there. And then API version 2, we removed that because, again, in 4 years, there were proposals and there were interest in there, but nobody ever wrote one. So that was eventually removed from there. But there is a possible opportunity here where we could just rev the version from API version V2 to V3. Helm 3 could handle all 3 different versions, and you could provide some kind of template. But again, like what Butcher said, this is probably a good opportunity to start talking about a Helm improvement proposal. So you can have those conversations about what do we talk about backwards compatibility? How do we talk about addressing those things? Because there's also been other parts as well that are separate, like the post rendering. That's a completely different use case than a separate templating engine, but it does handle some of the use cases that others have. So coming to the table with the use cases that people have, what are the justifications for those is an important point. And then also, if it does come to the point of like a Helm 4, you have to have the conversation about what's the justification for the entire community to start moving from Helm 3 to Helm 4. And what does that mean for the core maintainers in terms of like the support required for Helm 3? And what's the justification? Why am I moving from Helm 3 to Helm 4? What's the big upgrade there? So a couple of things to touch on there.
You're so right, Fisher, especially because so many people are still on Helm 2 and we're getting the carrot and stick of getting them to move to Helm 3. But it's great that we're talking about stuff that could either be added on as an option, or it could be in, a future major version. But I love the idea of anything we can do before we get to a future major version, but laying this groundwork now, like Butcher said, this is a fantastic time to talk about it. Even though obviously if we can't even get people to move from 2 to 3, we're not going to get them to move from 3 to 4 instantly, but this is the right time to start for sure.
So Tim, maybe the takeaway is nobody said no. We had something in the past that people didn't use, and maybe it was a timing thing. And the process to add something like this in is a HIP, a Helm improvement proposal. And so I think there is a path forward to continue this moving forward. And you should
Now,
be
one
familiar
question.
with HIPs since you've had to deal with so many caps.
Would Tim, in your idea, would you also provide a first implementation of some new templating engine?
I'd be driving the requirements for a team to probably be engaged here. So I'd probably be working with that team and maybe chart or task them out with trying to get a potential implementation rolling.
All right. Okay.
Should end with a warning that this is harder than you think it is.
Oh, no doubt. I've been around this game for a long time.
He's met Kubernetes, so he knows. You have the 1,000-yard Kubernetes stare, right, Tim?
All right. Next item on the discussion, Helm v3.5 coming up, like we said, in less than a month. Actually, in a month.
Yeah, so it shows up in about a month, and about half that time, nobody is going to be around for. And really,
wait, please don't say V5 because I'm going to have a heart attack. You mean 3.5.
3.5, yeah.
Didn't I say 3.5?
I thought I heard V5 and I was like,
3.5. 3. The 3 sounds like a V here. Instead of Martin, where it sounds like a tree.
Yeah, where's Martin?
The 3 sounds like a V. And really, we're going to cut the release candidate. I think the date we're looking at is January 4th in order to give time for it to soak before we actually release it on the 13th. So that's less than a month away. There are a number of open pull requests, and I'll have at least one more. So I want to ask the core maintainers to take just a little time. Many of them are super easy to review, or there are some that aren't and may not land in 3.5. But if we could take a little bit of time, maybe even just over the next 2 weeks, and try to merge some of these in, we'd actually have a better off 3.5. And I know this is probably our weakest minor release of the year because the holidays and conferences and everything else that go on this time of the year. But I just like to encourage everybody to go over there in the core maintainers and review some of them. There's like 10 open pull requests right now.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Anything more on 3.5? All right. I added an item because I figured we'd have time. I was working on the calendar yesterday, so when I shadowed Matt for the release, and then I realized we have a calendar for meetings. So there's already a Helm calendar for meetings. Now we created a Helm calendar for releases, and I don't know the background of the meeting calendar, but should we have just one Helm calendar? Any opinions on that?
I don't have any particular opinions on that. I mean, the release or the actual shared calendar was there just to coordinate efforts and just to provide visibility for the rest, not just for the core maintainers, but also for the chart maintainers and for anyone else who wanted to get involved with getting into meetings and things like that. So if it seems like a good idea for like community members who want to get the meeting invites or want to know about certain release deadlines, then that's fine.
I guess the releases have a much wider interest than the meetings, so maybe it's worth keeping them separate.
At the same time, we have in the past like posted the deadlines for those releases using the GitHub milestones. So there has been that form of communication in the past used that way. So having two different places of sharing that kind of communication does make it a little bit more difficult to sync up. But yeah, whatever happens to be the right way, it's not much of an issue. It's just more of like getting the process of who is going to keep that meeting calendar up to date and Is that part of the release manager? And is that more difficult than, say, just updating a GitHub milestone with a release timeline? And is that something that people can easily review?
Well, the calendar is also there for us, the release calendar, because we're humming along. We need to know the dates that somebody has to show up and cut that release. Like when that release candidate comes, I'm going to need a reminder probably on January 4th. I expect I'll probably do it because I'm the one who's been harping on it. But we actually need to remind ourselves when this is. And so all the core maintainers should be on that calendar and get a reminder, say the day before. So we know we got to go cut a release. So we don't accidentally miss it because nobody noticed the dates. And a GitHub milestone doesn't give us those active reminders we need.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's literally just a date on the milestone. There's no notification system or any kind of update other than saying after you look at the milestone, it's like 3 days overdue.
So if you're a core maintainer, Fisher, please send over your Gmail email address to us so we can add you to this calendar, and you can also have it too.
You know, there are multiple Fishers on this call. We have no way to disambiguate one particular member of the team anymore.
I think there were 2 call outs. Sure.
I'm going to assume that it's not for me.
You know,
This is aspirational. It could be.
Our
You're
Fishers
here,
overlap
so-
with our Matts. That's our problem. Our Fishers overlap with our Matts. We're gonna have to start calling him by his middle name or something.
And he's a Mark too, so I mean, so it's we've been cloned. All right, so that was the last item, I think. Let's pick moderator notes and triage before we open the floor to any other points people would like to bring up. Volunteers for moderator.
I think I can triage next week. I'll just take that one since nobody ever wants to do that one. Oops,
Thank you from everybody else.
Sorry about that.
I can take notes next week. Oh, wait, no, I can't. I'm gone the 17th, so I can't take on any responsibility. Sorry about that.
I don't mind moderating again if I don't bother anybody.
I'll take notes.
Oh, but we have Karana wants to take notes, and she has recently joined the call. So
All you. It's all you.
Yay.
Can I interest you in triaging as well?
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. Actually, what I would love to add, since we have a few minutes, is I see new faces or recently joining faces on this call. I would love to open the floor and have people who are newish to the call and are not often unmuted and speaking, unmute, speak, introduce yourself. Tell us what makes you want to come to this call, since you do not appear to be, Russian Zoom bombing trolls. So what makes you interested in coming to this possibly random call? And I will pick on Mark Fisher first, because he already has so much overlap that it's like he's already a core team member.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I would join this call just to create some confusion with the names. I guess I was successful. I'm interested, actually. I'm from VMware, was also interested in the topic that Tim raised, and looking forward to following up on that with the HIP. I work on the developer platform team as part of the Tanzu platform. So it's relevant to us in terms of the packaging of user work, application workloads, as well as the services that run on the platform.
Awesome.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. All right. And Karina, you're already joining and signing up to do notes next time. So tell us about yourself.
So I think I introduced myself a couple meetings or a month or 2 ago, but for the new ones, I am from Red Hat. So I currently wear the red hat, Tim. And I work in the product management team. So I'm just excited to be here.
Nice. Awesome. All right. And I think, let's see, who else doesn't come to this call all the time? Just, Aaron, say something.
Hey there, I'm Aaron, coming from VMware as well. I think similar story as Mark, John, and Tim. I work on the team that supports the Carvel tools and works on YTT. So yeah, I was curious about this conversation. Looking forward to working on the HIP and driving this forward. But additionally, just really excited about finding the ways that Helm and Carvel can really work with each other. And yeah, really just kind of drive the communities forward there.
Awesome.
Same story. My name is John Ryan. I'm calling out of Los Angeles, and I'm at VMware by way of the Pivotal acquisition. I was with Pivotal for 5+ years, mostly in labs, and then went over to R&D, and so doing a lot of like web development and stuff. And going into R&D, really got into the ops side of things, kind of pulling back from a prior life around operations and doing that kind of stuff. And now I'm a maintainer on the Carvel, the team that's one of the teams that's maintaining Carvel, and really focusing on YTT. So I was also here like listening in and read up on prior conversations around making templating potentially pluggable, and totally respect the the complications and the challenges that come with that. But yeah, just kind of, and then also just participating in the community here. So
Awesome.
Welcome.
thank you.
I've been
Glad to be here.
showing up for like a month and a half, but I don't think I've ever actually introduced myself. I'm Joe Julian. I work with Day2IQ, and we have tools that use Helm to install vast sets of applications, and we keep finding holes in its ability to do the things that need to be done. So we're trying to start making more contributions.
Well, I mean, the great
That's
thing
great.
is if you are finding the holes, that means that you can help fix them before your customers fall into them.
That's the plan. Right now we're doing a lot of working around, but yeah.
Nice. This is fantastic. So we mentioned the Helm improvement proposal process before, but I do want to make sure everyone does take a look at it. And I think Farina dropped a note in the chat earlier with a link to it. But this is very much not a go away. This is we care enough to want to dig into this with you. So yeah.
Well, and we did make a commitment to do all of Helm 4 as HIPs, because last time people felt like the core maintainers just did their stuff the way they wanted to do it, and everybody else was straddled with an unfair system. So this time Matt Fisher wrote up the HIP one, which is the guidance for how to do it. It's based on the Python pip process, so it should be familiar to many people. If you haven't written one, you've probably at least read bits and pieces of them. So we're trying to make a very firm commitment that all non-trivial features go through the HIP process at this point. And part of that is because it helps us, and part of that is because it's part of our due diligence to the community to ensure that features are well thought out and well discussed before things drop in Helm.
Awesome.
Excellent. We have 5 minutes left. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up?
Helm issue 8977 was Paul G. Miller. He talked about a couple of clusters with large amounts of Helm releases stored as secrets. We have discovered we have more than one customer who is hitting this. We have a couple of releases that are about 500K secrets, and then and one of them was failing to install correctly, and so it was just getting reinstalled over and over again. So when it had about 200 5K secrets, and you do a Helm list, it would just kill the control plane entirely. So
yeah, we are strongly recommending that people use the Postgres or other database backends for systems that use that many.
Wait. Helm 3 can be configured to use a different backend?
Yeah, there are several storage backends, including the Postgres backend. There's some scalability issues when you start running into etcd with large amounts of queries and getting those kind of lists, whereas databases are more well suited for that. So there is documentation available for like setting up that storage backend. I think it's still in beta. Maybe not.
No, it was in beta and Helm 2. The Helm 3 version is considered stable for all intents and purposes at this point.
Right. Okay. So yeah, there is some documentation available for setting up a different storage backend, and one of them is Postgres. So you could look into that as like a different storage backend. The alternative is, like we've discussed in that ticket, like we could take a look at label selectors to make sure that if there's
label selectors won't work because it's still the API server still pulls etcd for the entire list of secrets in the namespace.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You have to break them up by namespace, or the way we're looking at possibly doing it is querying the releases have a predictable name, and we could actually grab them one at a time, and that way the API server can do the rate limiting.
Yeah, but then if you go into an endpoint where you have a release with thousands and thousands of release, you come into this exact same problem again. Like another way that APIs
no, because if you're doing a get instead of a list, you don't have that problem.
Okay.
So anyway,
trying to find the documentation. Does anybody remember? Is it in topics?
I found it. It's under topics advanced.
Oh yeah, there you go. And there's another one, permissions management for SQL storage too. So those get you started. There's actually a pluggable system in the back end for this, so you can write a custom storage layer. So if people are interested in trying things like MongoDB or Redis or anything like that, the interface is actually fairly simple for Helm.
Awesome. I'm glad I brought this up.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
And that sounds to me like a giant improvement in docs possibility that we could put a pin in that and say, if this wasn't clear, we could make it more clear.
So 1 minute left. Anybody else wants to try their luck at getting some great information out of us? Not me really, but.
I had an easy to answer question. There was some talk in way back, especially in some of those discussions about those templating engines. There was like, we were toying with looking at Luau, but then there was like other, like, it sounds like lightweight explorations and perhaps having a WASM execution environment. Is there any kind of movement there? Is that still in dreamland, or?
There is ongoing research, but no HIP for that yet. You probably know that my team does a lot of WebAssembly, so we are actively looking at that. Context was we got really, really far on the Lua implementation, and then decided at the 11th hour that we were not going to be able to make it do quite what we wanted to, and we had some serious community complaints in our choice of languages. A couple people were very, very, very loud on Twitter and elsewhere that they didn't want Lua, and so we pulled the plug on that one at the end of Helm 3. Right, I think it was what, Adam, like a month or two before the release. And so WebAssembly is our current strategy for if we can provide a more language agnostic runtime that other people would be able to leverage however they wanted to. So we're not making any commitments about it, but it's an idea that's on the table for Helm 4 and that I think would be worth keeping on the table. The characteristics of a WebAssembly runtime are very much amenable to this particular kind of use case. So it could offer some very compelling features.
All right.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, John, for the question. All right, so we're past the time. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you hopefully next week. Have a good week.
Bye.